tough one to follow. I don't know if it's on.
My name's Cole. I was Jess's best friend for 20 years, and so it is a little bit long, whatever, but this is fun. My mom was worried I was going to bore you to death, but I'm going to try not to. So Jess and I met at Prince Plus Frame Shop in Melbourne Square Mall back in '98. We both worked there. And we talked about how hard it was to make friends and started cracking jokes, and within a short amount of time, we became besties. We both grew up feeling awkward in different ways, and it was the same uniqueness that drew us to each other. We could say or do anything around one another without judgment, and found each other hilarious. From deep intellectual conversations and our deepest, darkest secrets, to our imaginations running wild, pretending to be in outlandish situations, time spent together was always nonstop talking and laughing, and so our friendship flourished. In the early days, going out was always a riot. We would find all kinds of fun ways to get guys to buy us drinks without having to hook up with them. And it wouldn't even be something we discussed beforehand, never premeditated. Some poor soul would walk up to us, and when we introduced ourselves, without missing a beat, out would come Tiffany or Monica or whatever name we picked. And we'd get to talking, and if the guy asked us what we do for a living, the conversation would go in the direction of her being upset with me because I was a stripper and she didn't want me to be, and I would chime in with something like, but baby, you know they mean nothing to me. You'd think guys would move on, but on the contrary, they'd rush to buy us drinks as if they were grabbing popcorn for a good movie. And every time it happened, we changed the names and stories of it. It was never rehearsed, always spontaneous. We were just synergistic like that. In the 20 years we've been friends, we actually only lived in the same town that very first year. After that, the two of us moved around like pawns on the US map. I went off to college first in Tallahassee, and she came to visit several times before heading off to the Air Force. I don't think either of us would have made it through those times without the countless emails and 72-page letters we'd send each other, detailing everything we were doing, and most importantly, our innermost thoughts. We would always address them to and sign them as random famous people. So I would anxiously await my next letter from Sally Struthers or Florence Nightingale. Though we'd be apart, we'd always have visits on the calendar, and those visits were always an adventure. One time, while she was in training in Mississippi, some friends and I picked her up on the way to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. It was an epic weekend of debauchery filled with parades, a little bit of flashing, and a whole lot of beats. It also ended with Jess knocking out a front tooth, which wasn't exactly the best thing that could have happened, considering she didn't have permission to leave the military base. But leave it to Jess not only to get away with it, but have the military pay to fix her tooth. I still have no idea how she pulled that one off. I wound up moving there the following year in New Orleans, and her coming to visit was one of my favorite memories. We spent several days gallivanting around Bourbon Street, which included a spontaneous official beer drinking contest between the two of us on the stage, a spontaneous stage performance of I Will Survive at another, and pretending to have British accents whenever anyone talked to us, although it was obvious no one was buying it. I remember the letter she sent when she found out where she would be stationed after training. The words Nebraska were capitalized and underlined. Neither of us had any idea where that was, and we had to look on a map to figure it out. I give her so much credit for doing what she did, just joining the military and taking it all in stride. We always joked that I would have never made it one day. But I promised her that whether they sent her to Nebraska or the moon, I was going to visit her whenever I could, and I did, twice. One of my go-to stories about us spawned from one of those visits. We decided on a whim that we were going to drive to South Dakota to see Mount Rushmore. We booked a room, got up early the next morning, and headed out. It was going to be a 10-hour drive, and this was back at a time where we only had paper maps and flip phones. But we didn't mind. As per usual, we were rocking out to the 80s, singing and dancing, soaking in the great wide open. A couple hours in, we noticed there were less and less cars on the road, and more cows on the side of the road. A few more hours after that, we noticed no other cars on the road and no cows. Jess's car was rattling a little, and we lost cell service. Our singing and dancing kept getting quieter and much less enthusiastic until we were both eventually sitting in silence, which was probably the first time ever for us. We started noticing signs, big billboards that were pro-hunting and things like dirt for sale and 24-hour tow service, only it was spelled T-O-E. It was then we realized we were in the makings of a horror movie and we did not want to play the role of the victims. As if on cue, it started to snow, and without hesitation, we decided to turn around and head back. You'd think after driving 5 hours, only to turn around and drive 5 hours back, you'd be pretty annoyed, but no. Cranked up the music again, we were back to singing and dancing all the way home. And that's just how we were. It was always about the journey and not the destination. No matter the distance between us, we were always connected, and everything we did, we wished we were together. The first couple years I was away at school, anytime Jess would go out with friends, she would keep an empty chair next to her and tell people it was for her best friend, so that I could be there in spirit. Later, she would send me pictures of herself in her Air Force camo with a stick figure drawn next to it with an arrow pointing saying it was me. Aside from letters and emails, we would come up with other fun ways to stay connected. One thing we did was whenever one of us would say something random and ridiculous, which was quite often, we would then task each other to draw out our interpretation of the phrase. For instance, she once said something about dancing on horses with popsicles, don't ask. So we chose that as our theme to artistically interpret. A week later, we received each other's artwork in the mail. And if you know Jess, and she was an amazing artist, what she sent to me was this incredibly detailed masterpiece that belonged on a wall somewhere. Whereas I not only paled in comparison with my rudimentary painting skills, I managed to completely screw the whole theme up and did horses sitting on popsicles. But it just made the whole thing more funny and hilarious and memorable. Together, we were a force of nature, literally. Anytime we would visit each other, some kind of natural disaster would occur. She came to see me in Tallahassee and got stuck there due to an impending hurricane. The first time I went to visit her in Nebraska, on the very first day I was there, I noticed there were flyers all over the barracks with info on what to do in case of a tornado, but she said, don't worry about it, we've never had that happen. Of course, later that day, it starts to rain. We went out to get a movie and some food, and her friend was driving. We get to the store, it starts raining harder. We pull in, people are huddled in the store. By the time I get out, it was starting to hail. We go to Blockbuster, and that dates it. We go to Blockbuster, and there was a sign that they were closed due to a tornado in the area. Tornado. So we got back in the car, started hailing harder, and all of a sudden, sirens were blaring all through the town. I've never heard that living here. And it was echoing through the whole town that, I guess, the tornado was on the way. So scenes from the movie Twister played through my mind as Jess's friends floored it at warp speed to get back to base. We knew it was serious when we saw that there was no unmanned entrance at the military base. By the time we got out of the car and ran in the building, hail was the size of baseballs and was shattering windshields all around us. We went inside to hunker down in the basement until we got word the coast was clear, and luckily it missed us. The only other time they had a tornado in the area was when I was visiting the following year. What are the odds? What also happened that year was after we arrived at our friend's house, 2 minutes after we got out of the car, there was a knock on the door. It was the neighbor looking for someone who drove a Saturn, Jess's car. A tree had fallen directly on top of the car only minutes after we got out of it. It landed so hard, all the doors were pushed wide open and the car was totaled. Crazy things like that always happen when we're together. We just attribute it to the power of our personalities combined. Because being around each other sparked this energy in both of us. We could be our truest selves, silly, sarcastic, and over the top. Anytime we were going to be bringing each other around other friends, we made sure to warn them in advance, we're going to be annoying. We had so many inside jokes, and as time went on, every funny saying or situation was added to our repertoire and made their way into our regular conversation. So anyone else in the room would usually be sitting there with a puzzled look on their face, trying to figure out what on earth we were talking about. For example, in one short conversation, you might hear us say things like dancing on horses with popsicles, speaking of cruises, bling bling, and no, I was just pretending we were in a game show. To everyone else, it sounded crazy, and rightfully so, but to us, it made perfect sense. Not only was Jess my best friend, she was the most amazing aunt to my twins. And I know all of you players can attest to that. River and Riley absolutely adore their Aunt Jess. I truly admired the way she was able to play with them in ways I could never think of. I once asked her how she could play with them so well, and she said, it's easy. You just play as if you were a kid again. And I was in awe of her answer because it was so simple, yet seemingly impossible for me and probably most other adults as we get older. While I wish they could have grown up knowing her, I'm so incredibly grateful they got to have so much fun spending time with her these past few years, and that we have a bunch of videos and pictures to look back at. Although I've said a lot today, words can't express what Jess meant to me. We experienced so much together, from visiting each other all over the country, multiple cruises, doing bungee chariot, the boardwalk in Daytona, and countless other adventures across the states. The experiences we shared were unparalleled, and in part shaped who I am today. Spending time with her brightened my days and enriched my life. And while it breaks my heart to lose her, I know she will live on in my heart forever through our wonderful memories. And though she can no longer be by my side, on the days I miss her most, I'll do as she used to do and slide an empty chair next to me and tell people it's for my best friend so she can be there in spirit.